Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for waiting. We would like to begin Parallel Session 4, COP28 Flash Seminar. This session will offer a flash report on COP28. The working language for this session is Japanese. There will be simultaneous interpretation provided. However, the presentation material will be in Japanese only. If you are entering on the English channel, we ask for your understanding. We will be receiving questions along the way. If you are joining us online, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, from the QA button, and for those of you in the hall, scan the QR code, and from there, use Slido to enter your questions. We will give priority to questions from the audience here at this hall. We ask for your understanding. We would like to turn to Mr. Otsuka Takashi, Director of Knowledge and Communications Strategic Management Office at IJS. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Tomura-san has now sped his way to the stage, which offers me a sense of relief. And this is the COP28 Flash Seminar. We are joined online as well. This is a hybrid session. It has been almost a week since COP28 on climate change has been concluded. And this session is to offer a flash report. There have been 5 online webinars, and the 5 members here have been in attendance, and they have prepared for COP28. They have attended COP28 and have returned. I'm sure some of the listeners have done the same. Many of our IJS staff members have made their way to Dubai, and with the 5 members here, as well as 1 member online, we have Tsukui-san, who is joining online from the UK. Climate change webinar usually would spend 1 hour on a single theme. However, we are going to pick up 6 themes within a span of 1.5 hours. I know this is really a tight contest, but we would like to enter into the main discussions without further ado. And together with the theme, I would like to introduce the speakers who have joined us. First of all, in reference to the positioning of COP, and also to report who has been with us from the morning, we have Mr. Tamura Kento, Program Director of Climate and Energy, IJS. And can we see Tsukui-san's screen image? Not right away, I guess. Please inform us when Tsukui-san is seen. And we have Koatsuku Kazuhika. He's the director of the Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center. And at COP28, looking at global stock taking, we have Ms. Tsukui Akemi, who appeared on the screen a little while ago. And there she is. And when climate change adaptation, we hear from Ms. Shiba Nagisa, policy researcher. And there are 2 more. Speaking on loss and damage, Okano Naoyuki. And lastly, on climate finance, Ms. Ota Junko, researcher. Thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, we hope to be able to compact this within the time that is given to us. We have conducted a rehearsal, and we have been talking about cutting down on our presentation, just touching upon the outline. And where you believe there's information that needs to be filled in, please present your questions, and we'd like to respond. And for those of you who are joining us in the hall, please scan this QR code and present your questions on Slido. Otherwise, if you're joining online, use the Zoom functions. And those of you who are using this, present your question, post your questions, and if there are other questions, also show your support, and that will bring that particular question higher on the list of questions. Well, let us start. We'd like to hear from Mr. Tamura on the brief introduction of the position of COP28. But before you conduct your presentation, we would like for you to share your memories.
What struck you most about COP28 this time? Thank you very much. Well, about my impression of COP. Well, this COP meeting was healthy COP. Yes, it was healthy. The reason why I say so is, well, it's an Islam nation, and you couldn't drink too much alcohol. Yes, we did consume some alcohol, but much less than usual. Plus, it was a huge hall, and you had to walk about 10,000 steps every day. So it's quite unusual that you do a lot of walking at an international conference. So that was a healthy COP. Okay, let me go straight into my presentation here. Please show the slide. Yes, I would like to talk about how to position COP28. The slide is not moving. Well, as you know, COP21 was where the Paris Agreement was adopted. And this Paris Agreement, it set out the 2 degrees target. And as a target to strive for, they put down 1.5 degrees C. And every 5 years, the NDC would be enhanced so as to raise the ambition level. That was the mechanism that was put in place. But this Paris Agreement, reduction of emission and trying to use not just the Article 6 mechanism, but adaptation and loss and damage and funding and every 5 years, plus transparency. Every 5 years, there was to be a global stock take so as to set and raise the next target. So these things were all included. It was quite a comprehensive agreement framework that was put in place under the Paris Agreement. And then after, because of the advancement in scientific knowledge, people started to target 1.5 degrees instead of 2. And 2 years ago at COP26, in the past 1.5 degrees was said to be a target to strive for, but 1.5 was set out as a target. In doing so, NDCs need to be reviewed, enhanced, plus coal, fossil fuel subsidies need to be addressed. So this was discussed at COP26 and decided. But then, from the Global South, they said that the commitment made by the developed nations, this $100 billion commitment had not been achieved yet. Plus, the loss and damage and other initiatives from a global size perspective were being neglected. Meanwhile, they are being asked to reduce emissions, so they expressed discontent. And last year at COP27, this led to the historical agreement to establish a loss and damage fund. At COP26, we did advancement towards the initiatives aiming towards 1.5 degrees, but we did not see much progress made at COP27. Now at COP28, There are various geopolitical and also food crisis, inflation, but people were committed to resolving this, especially for climate change. Global stocktake, the very first global stocktake took place, and they tried to review what had happened under the Paris Agreement so as to move to the next step. So that was one thing that happened, and the 1.5 degrees initiatives, how much progress was being set, and the Article 6 mechanism. This was another thing that was taken up fully. And from the Global South perspective, the loss and damage fund, whether it becomes operational, and also the adaptation, the GGA. Whether or not an agreement can be reached on the framework for GGA. And funding was another pledge, the $100 billion pledge. And after 2025, what will be the new target for funding? So these things were being questioned prior to COP28. So I hope that the answers will become clear in the presentations to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tamura. You report on the 6 themes, and now we'd like to move on to presentations on a per-theme basis. And we call upon Tsukui-san, who is joining us online, and we'll be discussing the prospects for global stock taking. And are you able to join us online? Thank you very much, Mr. Otsuka. Responsible for climate and energy, I'm the fellow at IJES. My name is Tsukui Akibi. Unfortunately, I'm not able to join you in person, but allow me to join online. The deepest impression that I have from COP28 is I was impressed and was very happy to know that there is hot water running from the water server. I was not able to make my way to the cafe, but when I wanted to drink something warm, supplying hot water from the water server was something that really gave me a sense of relief. But then I would like to conduct my presentation, and I would like to project my presentation material onto the screen. The outcome of COP28 in reference to global stock taking. In the first global stock taking that was conducted 2021 on November from COP21, and from 2022 to 2023, the early part of that year, there have been technical evaluation that has been conducted, and that is where the progress worldwide has been evaluated. And COP28, based on the findings thus far, negotiations have progressed, and ultimately, a 21-page, 196 paragraph of an outcome statement has been issued. In terms of some of the pointers, in 2024 and onwards, there has been a roadmap on combating climate change. We have looked at not only the result of the evaluation, but based on the evaluation, the activities that must be taken by players as well as expectations have also been drawn in. And in the next slide, based on the evaluation result, especially as far as mitigation, progress, and also opportunities to take action, will be presented. And thereafter, from 2024 and thereafter, for respective nations and also in UNFCCC, as well as non-state actors, there are these 3 major actors. And there has been wording about what needs to be done, and I would like to deliver on the wording within the outcome statement. And first of all, reference to mitigation. As for progress made in the past 1.5 years, there have been technological review that has been conducted, and discussions have progressed. And while progress has been made, it is far from achieving the target, and that has been agreed upon. And as Tamura-san has mentioned in COP27, he has mentioned that 1.5 degree target and progress has not been made. So he has said, and in the GST rather, given the gap that has been observed, it has been there's been emphasis on the necessity to take urgent action as well as a support in order to achieve the 1.5-degree target. In order to fill the gap, there are measures that need to be taken and also opportunities that arise. And there have been agreement made on this matter. The first of which is in reference to the new agreement in the energy sector. As for the details for transport and also methane, emission reduction, of course, is important, and Mr. Tomura will conduct a presentation in some detail later on, and therefore I will not dwell on this. For other activities that need to be taken in Article 6 in reference to implementation of the carbon mechanism and also biodiversity as well as the conservation of ecosystem as well as ensure sustainability of lifestyle as well as consumption patterns. These are matters that have been presented within this statement, which is a new development. And of course, these measures need to be taken and opportunities must be captured. And what is most important are the respective governments. 2024 and onwards, the respective countries have been encouraged to do two things, one of which is to reinforce climate action. As indicated in the outcome report, the respective nations are required to embed this within their national plans, and also support need to be taken, and that is expectation. And the second is the nationally determined contributions, which need to be, of course, revisited and reinforced. From November 2024 to March of 2025, respective countries are required to submit their next NDCs. And the next NDC will have to be aligned with 1.5-degree target. And for all, need to cover all greenhouse emissions. And there needs to be a target for reduction that will encompass all sectors within the economy. In 2023, December 3rd, there has been on-air NHK discussion program. And for the previous minister, there has been expression of studies on new numerical targets within Japan. And therefore, there are activities that are about to proceed here in Japan. And the UNFCCC has an important role to play to encourage activities by respective nations. And there is also a follow-up based on the outcome of the Global Stock-Taking Report. And as for UNFCCC, as we've heard today, there are adaptation, also loss and damage of funding that will be expressed during this session. And by theme, there are various programs as well as institutions, organizations that have been installed. And given the existing programs and also organization, GST in the first result will need to be reflected in the activity plans. For example, there needs to be, of course, adaptation funding. And through these existing mechanisms, there needs to be empowerment for the Global South, and also through the existing capacity building programs to help with the NDC programs and also implementation of Article 6 among the less developed countries. And given the existing framework, what is out of the framework, there have been new programs that have also been installed. And I would like to introduce some of these. For example, when it comes to technological implementation program and also ministerial meetings on adaptation funding and also expert panels in reference to mountains and also climate change, as well as expert discussions on climate change and children. These are forms that have been installed. As for these new programs, this will be used in order to effectively and also efficiently follow up on the outcome of the global stock taking. And this will also help to encourage the development of NDCs. And finally, the non-government players have an important role to play. I would like to emphasize that within the outcome report of the GST, there are non-government players that can play an important role and can work proactively. From 2024 and onwards, non-state actors in tangible activities we'll need to take into perspective the outcome of the first GST and to accelerate initiatives with respective countries and also work on effective development of SDGs and to work on ensuring synergy as in developing and also achieving SDG. There needs to also be promotion of a sharing of experiences as well as exchange of views and international collaboration for joint research and also talent development and project implementation as well as investment 2024. Tapping into these results, we need to work ahead to achieve the numerical targets. The GST outcome will be a guidance for climate action. So how can we work on this? This is an area that we'll continue to study as we roll out activities. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And that is all from my side.
And thank you very much for that very concise, brief presentation. Well, the GST involved a lot of things, and we are seeing a lot of outcomes coming out. You also explained about the challenges going forward. We already have a question here, but we'd like to take up the questions after we've listened to several presentations. And there was a question as to whether the materials have been posted. The Secretariat, yes, is it already posted? Yes, we're in the process of posting the materials, the slides. We ask for your indulgence. Next, again, Tamura-san will appear again. He will be talking about climate change mitigation, please. Yes, allow me to talk about mitigation. Well, time is limited, so let me just give you the highlights here. The first, well, as Tsukui-san has already explained, well, I'll skip this part because she's explained this, but about mitigation. Well, on the Paris Agreement, there were over 190 parties, and the negotiation and as a result of concessions, we've seen the scientific basis for the 2050 net zero emissions, and also shift away from fossil fuels, and also an acceleration of efforts to triple renewable energy capacity and double the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030 were agreed upon. So we commend this. But this is not sufficient, but at least it does give us a glimmer of hope for achieving the 1.5 degree C target, though it is just a glimmer of hope. As I said, NDCs, the nationally determined targets, raising the NDCs is not sufficient. But to complement, reinforce this, there are the roles to be played by the sectors and also non-state actors. So we think that there is higher expectations towards the role of these actors. But in response, can all countries by 2030 reduce domestic emissions? All countries, regions need to deepen and accelerate their efforts. And through such a process, they need to establish a 2035 target to be consistent with the 1.5 degrees C target. So whether or not this can be done, well, we were saying that the next 10 years will be crucial, but I think the next 5 years will be crucial. And also, the next NDC, the submission due date, will be November 2024 to March 2025. So Japan will have to engage in discussions to achieve this deadline. Well, the IGES 1.5 degrees roadmap, in that session, this was briefly explained about in Japan, we have to maximize the deployment of renewables. At the same time, we have to factor in the socioeconomic changes that will be required so that we can achieve 60% or more than 60% a reduction in compared to 2019 in 2035. So let's go paragraph by paragraph. Well, the global Stocktake, paragraph 25, the outcome document. It talks about the Paris Agreement temperature goal and the carbon budget consistent with this goal. It says it is now small and being rapidly depleted. That is what is written in this paragraph. This carbon budget, there is a temperature goal, and the amount of CO2 emission that can be cumulatively emitted is what is meant here. We talk about net zero by 2050. And this scientific basis is being provided by this budget. And in COP28, this has been for the first time stipulated. I think this is a major achievement. And also by 2030, the renewable capacity has to be tripled, and also energy efficiency on average doubled by 2030. This is also required. IEA was originally saying this number, but by 2030, in order to achieve 1.5 degrees C pathway, this is the biggest contributor. So this is the biggest contributor. And therefore, this will have to be a common understanding by all parties. However, having said that, under the current policies, by 2030, doubling, it'll be only a double plus, and therefore additional measures will be required to achieve this tripling of renewable energy capacity globally. And next about coal. Again, says accelerating efforts towards the phase out of unabated coal power. This is a carryover from previous document. What is unabated? And also, what does it mean to phase down? What is the timeline, etc.? This has not been agreed upon. Another, there has to be an equitable way where we try to transition away from fossil fuel. And this is also mentioned here. Well, how to handle fossil fuels. In the past two COPs, this was quite controversial. And for the first time here, there has been reference made to a fossil fuel. And UAE says that this is a historical achievement. Well, so transition away is a term that is used here, but some people say transition from. But looking at the original, it says transitioning away from fossil fuel, and transitioning from fossil fuel. That could be another expression, but because it has away, it has a stronger connotation. So I think that we are breaking away and transitioning away from fossil fuel. That is the nuance. And running out of time, I know. And the important is methane. And so methane, again, it is a powerful GHG, plus the life span is less than 10 years in the atmosphere. So I think that the reduction will have an immediate impact. So it is indispensable for 1.5 degrees C goal, but the reduction target and speed has not been agreed upon. However, I believe that between the U.S. and China, at a bilateral basis, for specific sectors, there will be measures taken to address methane. Other than that, the fossil fuel subsidies, these needs to be eliminated as soon as possible. Again, from 2009 and COP20, this has been talked about, but we're not seeing progress here. Amidst the energy crisis, the fossil fuel subsidies are at a record high. How this can be reduced will be a major issue going forward. Another is this transitional fuels. Recognizing that transitional fuels can play a role in facilitating the energy transition while ensuring energy security, it says. Well, so you wonder what this means. This transitional fuel, the definition is not described, but probably amongst the fossil fuel, there are those low carbon fuel of the natural gas. So they want to recognize the role that can be played by this natural fuel, I guess. So that is the reason why this term has been used. But in order to achieve 1.5 degrees, so new gas fields development should not be required. So this is something that you have to be careful about. Another major COP28 highlight focus was the fossil fuel, renewable energy efficiency, nuclear, forestry, food. There are various initiatives taken by different sectors. This has been taken up in the previous COP, but again, I've just picked up those related to energy, but it's not just coal, gas, oil, and hydrogen. So in all these, we see the sectoral initiatives being taken. So how much of an impact can we expect to see? It's on the right-hand side, difficult to see, I understand, but simply put, the dark blue, this is these sectoral approaches will make additional contribution to the NDC. So there's quite a lot of additional impact. But to do this with an accountable way is something that will be a challenge. Lastly, in this slide, well, this is has been explained in the previous session, but for the sake of PR, I put it in. Japan also, from next year, the next NDC will be discussed. We have this IGIS 1.5 degrees roadmap. So we'd like to actively engage in this discussion. Thank you. Kawuna-san, thank you very much. So you talked about mainly about the paragraphs 28, 29 of the Global Stocktake Outcome document. Thank you.
Now we'd like to turn over to Mr. Koakutsu. And we'd like to hear about the outcome of the discussions over Paris Agreement. Before we do so, your impressions on COP28? Thank you. The direction of the Paris Agreement, Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center. My name is Koatsu Kazuhisa. What has left an impression on my mind at COP28 in the Article 6 discussion, the youth from Japan attended, and that has left a deep impression in my mind and remains in my mind. And within the decisions at COP28, the youth climate champions have been referred to, and that has also been a part of the outcome document, and also it is also part of one of the last sessions within ISAP, and together with the youth, we need to together think about how to combat global warming. And this has been recognized. Efforts on Article 6 have only just begun. I do hope that we will be able to work together with the youth to carry this into implementation. So I believe that this is, of course, a point that has left an impression in my mind, and I recall very vividly. So I wanted to make that statement before I entered into the presentation. Now, in reference to the outcome of the discussions over Article 6, and you may wonder as to what Article 6 is all about. I'm also presented with that question, Article 6, and what does it mean? And I've thought about this long and hard, and myself personally, I figured that I would be able to clearly explain in this way. That is to say, net zero, or otherwise to achieve carbon neutral, there's an international cooperative framework, and that is what Article 6 indicates. Some might refer to as mechanism, or others might refer to as an international framework. At any rate, Article 6 allows us to create an opportunity for cooperation to achieve net zero. And that is the opportunity or potential that Article 6 offers us, and it's indicated to the left. Through implementation of Article 6, the NDC target will have to be achieved and also elevated. And in GST, this has also been made mention of, and this is an important point to focus on. And also through Article 6, we have in international aviation, there are efforts to achieve net zero as well. And hence, in this aviation sector, through Article 6, there are contributions towards achieving net zero. And various companies have upheld the objective of achieving net zero, and there are also credit mechanisms that have been accredited under Article 6, so it is said. And therefore, various players, given their various perspectives and situations can contribute to achieving net zero. And this will be a measurable reduction that will be presented or must be presented. And Article 6 will allow players to present a credit trading mechanism. And Clause 2 of Article 6, in achieving all of these targets, will allow us to conduct a count and also allow countries to present a report on progress made. As for concrete initiatives, there is a bilateral credit system that Japan is already conducting, so there are movements in that direction. There's also Article 6, Clause 4, which is a management mechanism or oversight mechanism conducted by the United Nations. Apart from that, there are also the private sector oriented credit mechanism. Once it is accredited under the national government, it can be deployed under Article 6, and hence there are various initiatives that can be deployed under Article 6. And moving on. We need to understand the rules under Article 6. In a nutshell, in COP26, the implementation rules have been agreed upon for Article 6. Of course, there have been negotiations that have culminated into the rulemaking. And last year in COP27, based on agreement at COP26, there have been detailed graphs, as well as a record keeping and also evaluation for the reports, and guidelines have also been decided. So from that perspective, as of last year, the rules, negotiations over the rules have been concluded. And this year, we're providing the final touches. As for areas that have remained unaddressed, there have also already been draft, of course, decisions. There have been annual report templates, and also there's a Clause 4, Article 6 mechanism, based on which we will be looking at modalities. And as we create the modalities, there will be guidance that will guide us, and that will be decided during the COP discussions, and these have been, of course, the agenda on the table, and based on which several countries have already issued reports and rolled out specific activities, including Japan. And from next year, we can expect to see a full-fledged implementation. And moving on. As for the results of the negotiations over Article 6, I would like to say the conclusion first and foremost on Clause 2 and also Clause 4 of Article 6. Agreement has not been made for a long period of time. Over 2 weeks, discussions have prevailed. And especially for Clause 2, and I have indicated the overview, the outline, this relates to the overall rules and how they will count into the target, and how the report will be issued, and how evaluations will be made. The rules have already been decided, but based on which the details needed to be decided, especially among the EU countries, this has been encouraged. However, other countries have indicated the rules have already been put into place, and only the minimally necessary rules need to be fine-tuned. And so there was a gap in terms of the position taken. And as for a document, what have already been decided, there have been very interpretive statements, and we have been able to slim down the documents ultimately. But even then, at this point in time in which deployment has not happened, some have mentioned that we should not decide on the fine details, and therefore we have not been able to achieve an agreement among the respective countries. To quite some extent, there have been rules decided. However, some have now been tabled for later. As for the finalization of, say, the table and also the registry for the credits, there are additional functions. I have also already mentioned that the the basic functions have already been agreed upon. However, the additional functions needed to be decided on. As for the UN mechanism, it's about deciding on the modalities, the methods to be taken, and this has been a major point in question. And this year, there have been various discussions, and also a draft statement have always been put together. Clause 4 on Article 6 is about the institution practicing oversight, and I'm a part of, have been engaged as a member in discussing the modality. And especially when it comes to things and also guidance. For example, we're talking about forests and also underground capture, that is to say, sequestering, and also if this and storing this, discussions have not been fully matured, and that has been expressed by EU members. And also, there has been a RED Plus mechanism for forest carbon 6, and that's on Article 5, the Paris Agreement. And from the countries that are related to this, there have been questions as to how this relates to Article 5. Discussions have progressed. And as for the guidance, among the oversight institutions, it has been decided that the final draft will be presented in next year's COP29. And otherwise, for Article 6, and there's Clause 8, in reference to international transaction, will there not be credit trading? There needs to be a need to pursue collaboration. There are mitigation, also technological transfers, and this will be put into scope within this clause. And especially for next year, there has been a website that that's been put together to share information about what's happening in respective countries. And if there's interest, there could be opportunities to work together. And there has been a decision to pull through with this website. And by next June, it was decided that this will be finalized and operated and implemented by the respective countries. And as for, this is also related to Clause 4 of Article 6. And under the Kyoto Protocol, there's a clean development mechanism that will allow the trading of carbon reduction. And in COP26, during that time, basically, it has been decided that this should be integrated under Clause 4 of Article 6, and therefore the CDM as a function per se would be put to a close. And when it comes to issuing credits, of course, the point in question under the discussion was how far this will go. It would initially it would be valid until end of 2025. And that was how the discussions progressed. And to 2025, end of that year, we believe that this will be where the line will be drawn. However, some of the countries have said that it cannot be decided. Of course, this will be a tentative deadline, and what will be the ultimately necessary functions. And also, there's a CDM surplus fund, and there was discussion about where the funds will be allocated. Of course, we need to identify what options are available. In the wording right now, in the adaptation fund, it will be reallocated, and the remainder will still be decided. And when I say the remainder, this could be serve the infrastructure of Article 6, or otherwise for something else, say capacity building, ISAPs. And in the technical paper, this will have to be sorted out so as to bring this subject to a close or decision next June. As for the CDM, myself, and also from Zambia, we have been serving as a co-chair, and we have been able to draw a conclusion on the CDM discussion. On the other hand, negotiations, in a sense, unfortunately, we have not been able to draw a conclusion. However, implementation has been the focus during the current COP28, and expectations also picked up considerably. And last year, Article 6 on the partnership has produced a partnership center. And also in terms of the support package, there are 74 countries and more than 100 institutions that are a part of the partnership. And together with our partners, we have decided to implement Article 6. And today, even from the morning hours, I have been listening to various sessions. And the potential for partnership has been put to an emphasis. It is extremely crucial and critical in terms of the way in moving forward. And hence, not just limited to IGES, we hope to be able to work beyond IGES in joint collaboration. And with Kazakhstan, also Vietnam, have also entered as partner. And lastly, and this is within my area of responsibility, basically 2, 4, and 6 clause of Article 6, we have not been able to achieve an agreement. However, basically on the decisions thus far made, Article 6 can be implemented based on the rules agreed. And why we were not able to achieve an agreement, this is because some of these have already entered into the implementation phase. And when it comes to the detailed rules, we have been met with the difficulties of putting together very detailed rules in an international framework, and therefore we need to, I believe we will be shifting over to a negotiation that will be focused on the minimally necessary rules, because the rules under Article 6 have already been decided. We are about to enter into full deployment, and therefore we need to offer support for the developing countries. And also in GST, has been now included as part of Article 6, and therefore the rule performed by Article 6, apart from implementing NDC, but also enhancing NDC and reinforcing NDC, has been put into perspective. And it is important to achieve this within the framework of international cooperation. Therefore, it is very meaningful that GST has been entered into Article 6, and we are about to see the period, the deadline come 2025. This is going to be the key to success as we move forward. Thank you very much. And of course, you're often referred to as Mr. Article 6. Including technical matters, you have offered us a report. We're running so much short of time. However, as far as first three, four presenters, if there are questions that we received, if you could respond over a single minute. And Tsukui-san, the prospect for global stocking as we work towards COP29 and 30 for NDC and also health, urban. If you could just even share your personal views, is fine. This is rather a broad question. However, in a single minute, if you could capture your expectations are. And Tsukui-san, to you. Thank you very much for the question. GST, when we look at the outcome and as to what activities will be taken, as to whom and where, the timeline as well as the clarity of the activities will really dependent on who is responsible. You have a given example, NDC, and also expectations of ambitions among countries. The speed of initiatives are different from country to country. In EU, in target making process, GST have already been put into perspective. They have decided to revise their objective. And within the national legislation, there are countries that have indicated NDC, and therefore, when it comes to revising the objective, it will, of course, progress smoothly. However, when it comes to developing countries where the infrastructure is still not there, reflecting the GST outcome into the national policy will be met with some difficulty, and therefore, what we come to attention is non-state actors, research institutions, as well as local municipalities and private companies, as well as NGOs, as well as youth. They have a role to play in the non-state actors that are rolling out measures to combat climate change. They will be able to, it would be best if there's a mechanism by which they will be able to deliver on their proposal. In implementation level, there's a stock-taking initiative, and to understand what can be done on a city-to-city level that can be reflected into national activities. There could be a top-down and bottom-up activity within the framework of NDC, and we hope to be able to see this by the year 2030 comes around. Thank you very much.
Next, Tamura-san, a question to you. In your presentation, you talked about shifting away from fossil fuel. So what about are the abated electricity power also subject to this? Well, yes, and that is a very difficult question. Well, just looking at the wording, it seems that all fossil fuel are included in this paragraph, but in the negotiation process, the term all or the unabated fossil fuel. Well, there were a lot of discussions as to what terminology should be used. And at the end, they concluded just saying fossil fuel instead of adding something in before that, transitioning away from fossil fuels. So I'm just looking at this, and you would think that all fossil fuels are included. Yes. Thank you. That was a very difficult question. Thank you. And let's proceed to the next three presentations. The first is adaptation, climate change, climate adaptation from Shiba-san. So what struck you most at COP? Well, thank you very much, Osaka-san. And once again, I am Shiba Nagisa from IGIS. I'm a policy researcher. Well, COP, every time it's so, but yes, well, Squeeze talked about the thankfulness of having hot water running at the server, but one coffee cost me 800 yen. I brought Calorie Mate with me, and I bought this 1,600 yen chicken curry, but it didn't taste good. So everything was expensive there. That's my impression. Thank you. Slide, please. So let me talk about COP28 and in the area of climate change adaptation, the outcome in this field. Well, again, yes, when we talk about climate change, people are interested in mitigation mostly, but adaptation is also a very important theme. And this time, at COP28, amongst there was a package of the outcome, and within the UAE consensus, there was important decisions made on adaptation. They're highlighted here. In regards to adaptation, the global goal, and the Sharm Sheikh, there was the GGA, and this had an outcome. So this was recognized here. And this work plan that was worked out, it was decided at COP26, and therefore it's named Glasgow work program, but at this COP, they were aiming towards having outcome at COP28. Now, let me talk about the work program and reflect on this work program. About adaptation, the global goal on adaptation, GGA, as it's said, this GGA, it's been said within the Paris Agreement, it was already included. And the Paris Agreement, Article 7, Section 1, it talks about the enhancement of resilience and reduction of vulnerability. So these GGAs were included, and as well as enhancing adaptive capacity. But this was very vague, and therefore is a need to work out the specifics. And therefore, at COP26, the work plan program was put in place. Last year at COP27, what specific was the outcome? So this was discussed, and as a result, when it comes to GGA, a new framework needed to be put in place. This was decided, and this time at this COP, the framework was adopted. Now, about this framework, it is UAE framework for global climate resilience. Now, the purpose of this is to achieve GGA itself, and also to review the progress being made overall towards achieving this GGA. Now, as for the contents, as the major points is that there is a goal set out. That is one thing, and this goal. There are two types of goals here. One is thematic, and the other is in line with the adaptation cycle. I'll talk about the specifics later on. And the other is that these targets, goals, each country will initiate and lead the effort in line with the situation of the country. So this is the major message from this framework. Then what specifically are included in these targets. So let me briefly talk about this. First of all, about the themes. Well, what's written here, there are 7 themes altogether. And for each of the themes, there are goals being set out. And it's not just at a national level, but all stakeholders have to work to achieve these targets. And this is up by 2030. That's the target date that has been agreed. And looking at these, you may come to understand water, agriculture, health. So it really is a diverse range of themes that have been taken up. Next, another target. This is, targets in line with adaptation cycle. The impact, vulnerability, risk assessment, plan, implementation, monitoring, assessment, and learning. So there is this repetitive cycle that is needed for the adaptive cycle. This has been the common understanding globally, and for each, there are certain goals or targets set out. For example, on the right-hand side, I've written this down about the impact, vulnerability, risk assessment. By 2030, all countries have to implement the latest assessment and incorporate this in the adaptation plan. Also, by 2027, all countries has to have established the multi-hazard early warning system, weather information service, and weather-related data information service. So these improvements need to be made. And this is my last slide, but this is a result of the outcome. This is my observation of what has been achieved in COP28. We have this new framework for GGA, but I believe that not only governments, national governments, but all stakeholders need to be engaged to achieve the GGA. I think that has been made clear through this outcome. Well, in other words, that this just indicates the direction. For example, you need to take up this theme, you have to do it within this cycle, etc. So just the direction of what the world has to do to achieve adaptation, what has been spelled out. But different stakeholders need to make efforts towards this goal. And under this framework, those efforts, collective efforts, will be made by different stakeholders. Now, I say different stakeholders, and each one of you here, I think this framework is very relevant. So this is what is meant by involving all stakeholders. For example, private sector, local government, civil society, and also regional community, research, and academic institutions. These various stakeholders have been listed in the document. So these different stakeholders have different knowledge, experience, and technology. They have to bring this together so that the world can achieve the adaptation goals. Therefore, as was introduced, there are the goals in place, plus the different stakeholders in different positions with different strengths that can be applied to achieving the adaptation goals. We want everyone to look into this, and I hope that this outcome document will trigger this to happen. As for the negotiations, for example, the GGA, what are the indicators or indices needed to measure the achievement level, etc.? These need to be examined further. So this has been decided, and there are several follow-up discussions that are planned for the future. And that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shiba. We must proceed very quickly due to time constraints, and now we'd like to hear from Mr. Okano Naoyuki on the outcome of talks over loss and damages. Thank you very much. My name is Okano Naoyuki, Policy Research at Adaptation and Water at ISAP. I would like to talk about the outcome on talks over loss and damages. First of all, impressions on COP28. The impressions left on me was the attendance of the youth, so I wanted to refer to that. However, it has already been mentioned on. Every morning, I use a train to go to the venue, and as I boarded the train, you might think of me as being a little nerdy, but I figured that the way the train accelerated was very, very Japanese, and I saw some Japanese characters, and I figured that, okay, I could be putting my concerns to rest. However, in the morning hours, it was packed with commuters, as we experienced here in Japan. And at night, people are dozing off in their seats. So it was really funny how things are really similar to what was happening in Japan. But anyway, putting that aside, let me just go into my presentation about loss and damages. In combating global warming, of course, mitigation and adaptation, of course, takes center stage. And therefore, we need to, of course, attend to risk. But in recent years, what's also captured a wider audience is the subject of loss and damages. And just to put this simply, by adaptation and mitigation, even having taken efforts, there are also losses and damages that remain. So how can we attend to these damages? As for loss and damages, 2027, in COP27 rather, as Tamura-san mentioned, there was a foundation on loss and damage. It was very historical development. And thereafter, if we could just proceed to the next slide. There's a transition committee where the discussions have produced a document on how to operate the funding on arrangement for loss and damages. There are 4, of course, meetings. However, it didn't work well, and it's been extended into the 5th meeting. And then the text was available before COP28. And in the seminar immediately before the COP28, we have covered this. However, this is unusual, but several hours before the opening plenary, the transition produced text was displayed by the presiding chair, and it was adopted at the plenary session. There was has not been met with any objections. It has been adopted, and due to the very brave decision by the presiding chair, UAE, and together with the agreement on funding arrangements for loss and finance, the COP28 came off to a smooth start. And as for the historical significance of the loss damage outcome, the loss and damages, the discussions when the agreement was made on UNFCCC, it had already begun. And 30 years down the line, finally, we have the operationalization of the funding arrangement conducive to substantive action. So this is a historical significance. 1990, as we see to the left-hand side, there's a logo, AOSIS, Alliance of Small Island States on the Pacific and also Indian Ocean. This is a negotiating group that represents these small island states. They culminated AOSIS. It was formed as a group advocating the position of these states in negotiating and proposed an insurance mechanism for losses caused by sea level rise. However, due to historical reasons, it did not culminate with the Warsaw mechanism. In terms of the technical aspects, in UNFCCC, discussions did continue. And with the obstacles now set lower in Article 8 in the Paris Convention Agreement, it has been produced as an independent article. But of course, we have to think about, of course, damages as well as the responsibility of the advanced nations. It is often taken into that perspective. However, within the discussions within the agreement, it was placed out of scope. The responsibility of the advanced nations were placed out of scope. The loss and damages of funding came into being. So what is important? What is the takeaway? This has been decided at the opening plenary, and there have been monetary contributions or pledge made by respective countries. This has really picked up on the encouraging feel of the plenary session. As you see from the top, France, Italy, and also Germany, we find that there have been substantial pledges voiced by the European nations. And down below, Japan has also made a measure of pledge, and also the presiding chair have also lived up to their responsibility as a presiding chair and made pledges. In total, this has culminated into $7 million of a pledge. That's about 102 billion Japanese yen terms. Why is this pledge important? One of the, of course, features as well as points that draw attention are the following. As for the main feature, the second point will draw attention. It is about this needs to be voluntary, and as the scale of the funding, there is no identification of a numerical target. Everything is to be conducted on a voluntary basis, and without the pledges made by the respective countries, the funding will not function. But it has materialized. And compared to what is actually necessary, it is still very, very small. However, the momentum has picked up during the COP28, and there have been pledges made. So this is a very encouraging development. As for other features, the World Bank will be entrusted with this operation and access available to the vulnerable developing countries. And otherwise, there will not be any special terms and conditions that we place. As for details, there have been a similar text. So if you look at the video, you will be able to understand some of the details. As to what will gather attention, I would have put this into 3 bullet points. The first of which is the World Bank will be entrusted with this operation. This has been controversial for vulnerable countries as well as communities. Will they be able to respond to expectations? In the 4 years, tentatively, the World Bank will be entrusted with the operation, and there will be terms and conditions which have been placed in the governance rules. And of course, the question is whether this will be honored. And number 2, sustainable funding. There have been pledges made already, as I've mentioned. In 2030, on an annual basis, $580 billion will become necessary according to some estimates. But there is a gap between the pledge and the required funding. Can we maintain the political momentum, and we will be able to mobilize funding from diverse sources, including private funding? We need to ensure that the loss and damage funding will be able to recruit support. And there will also be, of course, some contentious pieces of discussion. This is about, of course, the allocation rules as to how much funding will be allocated to which projects. A set of rules will need to be produced, and the Board of Governors will be entrusted with the decision. And we need to look at the priority items on the agenda for vulnerable countries and also attend to their capabilities. There will also need to be said to identify the minimal allocation amount for LDCs and also for the small independent island development states. And this is the last slide that I would like to share with you. Of course, one of the centerpiece would be the loss and damage funding. For loss and damage in the Warsaw International Mechanism and also Santiago Network, for the technical aspect, there have been institutions and organizations that are already in existence. And I would like to share with you some developments in the Santiago Network, which engage various organizations to provide technical assistance that has been produced from COP25, and rules and also responsibility have been decided. There is also an advisory group that have in earlier previous discussions have been decided from Dr. Takemoto from United Nations, as we see in this photo, has been decided to participate in the advisory committee. So Santiago Network will be engaged in loss and damage funding to offer technical advice to provide support to the vulnerable countries. And Japan will proactively participate in these discussions. And that is all from my side. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Okano. You have dashed through the presentation, so now we are on track in terms of time.
The last speaker will be Ota-san. She will talk about climate finance. Please. I am from Kitakyushu Urban Center of IGES. My name is Ota. Allow me to talk about climate finance. Slide, please. Next one. Well, the topics covered under the climate finance negotiations are very diverse and large in number. They can be broadly divided into 3 categories. First is collective goals, and second is reporting by parties, and third is, well, there's a lot of here about the finance mechanism funds committee that serve UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. So the parties provide guidance and direction to these organizations, and the functions of these organizations review and revise their governance. Now, and in addition to this, there were two more tentative agenda items proposed. That is doubling the adaptation fund to follow up and track the doubling of adaptation funding by 2025 compared to 2019 committed at Glasgow. And the other was Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, and is about paragraph 1c or Article 2, which contains the objective of the Paris Agreement, which is to adapt the flows of funds or low carbon and resilient development. But at SCF, the Standing Committee on Finance has already taken up this topic, so it's integrated into their discussion, and therefore it was not taken up as a topic per se. Now, I'd like to focus on the red part here. There are two. First, targets currently in place and new targets for 2025. These two decision documents were adopted, so allow me to talk about these two included under the collective goal. Now, first, the current target. This is the long-term finance, LTF, and the target is up to 2025. Now, this goal is under in the context of Article 9 of the Paris Agreement on financial support to developing countries. It was decided that US $100 billion per year would be mobilized from developed countries to developing countries, and there is need to track this progress. And this is the adopted document. It's a two-page, very short document. Now, when we read this, for each paragraph at the beginning, you have to focus on the verb to understand what was understood or agreed. Now, the blue, these verbs, for example, recalls, emphasizes, or recognizes past decisions or welcomes some report or contribution. But it was not assumed that new decisions, agreements would be reached. So I think that many of the verbs were in blue. But the verbs in red are requests or requests for something. And in this case, to achieve the full $100 billion target as soon as possible, it talks about the request or report to promote such efforts. Now, and there are 3 points that I would like to focus on here. First, about the quantitative achievement. Currently, the $100 billion of the $100 billion goal target, 89.6 billion is achieved. And it is a significant growth year on year, but it underachieves the 100 billion. And therefore, they use a strong term urge to demand immediate and complete achievement. And also, there are differences between developing and developed countries as to how they perceive the current situation. The developing nations say deep regret, whereas developed countries say welcoming the ongoing efforts. And so the text balances both sides. Next. The second point is funding for adaptation. Adaptation mitigation funding, 50-50 is the target, but we have not yet seen this achieved. According to OECD statistics, the share of adaptation funding is 24%. Though it is growing compared to last year, percentage-wide it has declined. And meanwhile, the cross-cutting it grew from 6% to 11%. It grew significantly. Against this backdrop, a demand for public funds and grants from developing countries was emphasized. Also, it was also emphasized that more should be provided from the adaptation fund. The point 3 is about the definition and calculation method of climate funds. Currently, there is no single universal definition or accounting method, but several groups are adopting similar methods. For example, including Japan, many developed countries use the OECD DAC, a real marker standard, and the multilateral development banks, MDBs, issue joint reports like this once a year to harmonize their methodologies. And this data is coming from OECD, but other than that, there's Oxfam and NPO, a non-profit organization, and others, which aggregate the data. And there's discrepancy amongst the results, and this has been recognized in the document. Now, this issue of methodology is complicated, but when setting new goals, as well as the adaptation funding doubling commitment, 2019 is the benchmark and to be doubled by 2025. The basis of calculation is unclear, and this needs to be clarified. And next, I would like to discuss some new global overall financial goals for 2025 and beyond. The goals have not been set yet, but they have been carrying discussions. It is a 3-year discussion, and with this COP, they've just completed 2 years, and the decision is due to be reached at COP29 next year. And this is a decision document, 3-page plus long. The content talks about the work process for next year and what kind of discussions, the modality to take place. That was the only decision made here. Next. And there are 2 ways in which the process was determined. One is that they will set up 3 additional negotiating sessions before COP29. Already, the past 2 years, TEDs, technical expert dialogues, have been held 3-4 times a year. It's a workshop-style discussion. Next year, they're planning to schedule 3 additional new meetings to coincide with these drafting negotiation texts. And also another is a high-level ministerial dialogue to be held before, significantly before COP29. This is an arrangement to ensure that the technical level negotiations receive political guidance in a timely way. And therefore, there will be more opportunities to negotiate next year so that at the working level and political level, various intensive discussions can be made to draft a decision document. And the elements of the new target has already been decided. For example, quantity. For the quantity, the lower limit is the current $100 billion. It has to be above $100 billion. And in addition, there's quality, scope, access to funding, financial sources, and transparency, meaning reporting methods. These also need to be decided. All these elements have been covered in the dialogue over the past 2 years. And countries are now in a position to share their views. In addition, some of the elements that are relatively easy to find common ground have begun to be discussed at this COP, but it's still early to reach a final discussion. So this time at COP28, they only decided on the modality. And next year, they will have a long list of options to choose from, and they will have to shortlist and narrow down the options, and the negotiations are likely to accelerate. Please keep an eye on the developments to follow. Finally, just another topic, during COP, there are, in addition to negotiations, something or other day for different topics. And on this day, December 4th, both Agenda Day and Finance Day were featured. And this picture shows SCF, a Standing Committee on Finance event. Everyone is wearing pink. And we, before COP, were asked to bring a pink dress in what's up, and so this is to support gender. Well, in recent years, we have seen an increase in the use of gender responsive and other phrases in decision documents. And next year, the SCF will organize an open forum, and the theme of that is gender responsive funding. We have already decided on this theme. Now, this SCF committee is handling a lot of things, and defining climate change, and also how to double the adaptation finance, etc. Article 2.1c, how to proceed with private finance, etc. I think many of the topics which are thought to be difficult are being taken up, and we are overworked, but we are working hard with the so-called pink power. And this day I wore a pink dress for this. Thank you. Oda-san, thank you very much.
There is questions we have received. There are questions with reference to whether SDGs was also discussed during COP28. Ms. Ota, I didn't ask you about your memories from COP28. I figured that this would be one of your most memorable moments.
Well, yes, plus the venue was where they had the expo, the lighting. Well, yes, the Yokohama is known for its night view, but the color, the design, the use of lights was beautiful. And in the negotiation, we were exhausted, having to negotiate late at night, and going outside, we were really healed by this beautiful scenery. We were really inspired by that. So I think designing something with a certain intention, trying to design something beautiful, does really have a healing effect and appeals to people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to your cooperation, we still have some time left for Q&A, 7 minutes. And if we go around the panelists, it means a little more than 1 minute per person. And Tamura-san, followed by Koat-san. There have been many questions on Article 6. So I figure that this is an area of high interest, and I would like to read out some of the questions. First of which is in CDM, functional halt. What is the impact on JCM? Is there an impact on JCM? Someone has voiced concern. And where was it? I'm not able to locate the question. There are many matters that have not been decided. However, next year, transactions will begin. But even without the rules set, transactions can begin. Why is it so? If you could respond on these two questions, please. Thank you. First of all, on CDM and also JCM, the relationship CDM has developed under Kyoto Protocol. As I mentioned up front, basically this will be terminated. And JCM, Article 6 in Paris Agreement, is where it started, and the rules have already been established and will be implemented accordingly, and therefore there will not be any impact. And as for the rules, in COP26 and 27, during which time the rules have been established, and what was to be decided were additional rules on which a study will continue. The rules have been decided, and hence implementation will be most crucial. And therefore, as we implement, where necessary, the rules will be amended. And that is all.
Thank you very much. And next, Shiba-san. GGA related, GGA. Will it have an impact on domestic policy and also international contribution, including the schedule, please? Thank you. Well, in my presentation, I really gave you just a brief explanation. I could not explain about the background. Well, the GGA discussion, the background is that amongst the developing nations, when it comes to adaptation, the funding and other support is insufficient. They say that there is need for more additional funding, and based on this understanding, various discussions have taken place. Now, the framework, which is an output, it applies to all countries. But in case of Japan, what is wanted is that we provide more international contribution to the global south. I think that is one of the requirements for Japan. And by 2030, well, aiming towards 2030, there are several goals that have been set out. And many countries, I showed that cycle, and they were really having problems at the first step. In order to do planning, there's need for supporting. And even if you have a plan in place, there are countries that cannot implement. And by 2030, I think there will need for more support. I showed that by 2027, for example, early warning systems or climate-related information data systems need to be put in place, and improvements are needed. I think that was one of the things I explained. By 2027, well, it's really nearing, and we don't have much time. And this year, the Japanese government launched the early warning system, public-private consultation mechanism. So I think that through such consultation, we need to make greater contribution to the international community. I hope that the momentum will build up. Thank you.
And Okano-san, for loss damage funding, there have been questions, many questions. And what is the scope that we will cover? And in terms of specific questions, for example, there could be multiple sources, funding sources, including from the private sector. And in terms of the characteristics of the loss damage funding, for non-concessional funding, what will happen? Would that be included or not? And as for the value, $7 million have already been expressed as pledges. That has already been pledged. And there's also climate funding in the realm of $3 million. What is the relationship between the two? I believe that is a question. It's a rather fuzzy question. Thank you very much. In terms of non-concessional, as you well understand, I think your understanding is correct. However, the details while in operation will be determined. As for the private sector, it's important to, of course, tap into multiple funding sources. And this has already begun. And from public sector, basically, it will center around government funding. But more than adaptation, loss and damage funding has a very public feature characteristic to it. But when it comes to insurance, and also we are also using private sector mechanism as well, which includes insurance. And therefore, we will need to study seriously how we will be able to, of course, capture private funding. And as for climate funding and how it differentiates, perhaps I could hear from Ota-san. But loss and damage funding is very different. And because it is different, for anything that is really similar, basically, of course, it has to do with adaptation. But then loss and damage funding, and how is it different in terms of the funding that is going to be allocated in terms of target project? That is going to be very important. In Article 8, there are several, of course, examples. For example, early warning system. And as Ms. Shiba has mentioned, for GGM framework within, there's also reference to early warning. So this could lead to, of course, confusion. So we need to sort that out as well as to what's going to fit into the concept of loss funding and what is going to fit into the concept of adaptation. As for the last question, as to the specifics, I'm not sure if I'm able to really capture everything, but with loss and damaging, it's very difficult to, of course, differentiate against, of course, climate action in terms of losses. But with climate change, there, of course, are residents that are robbed of their, of course, settlement, and we refer to this as a climate displaced persons or refugees. And the people have been forced to change their, of course, place of residence, and they are required support. And to the governments, under which guideline can they use in order to ease the concerns of society? So these are, of course, substantial and also technical facets by which support can be dispensed, and that will mostly be what is expected out of the loss and damage funding. So we need to sort all of these out to understand what is most appropriate. That is all.
Let me add something to the fund. Now, there are 4 funds under the UNFCCC, and the loss and damage is the last one. One is Special Climate Change Fund. So that's and there's another one, LDC Fund. Well, so the least developed countries and Adaptation Fund. This is under the Article 6 mechanism. So funding is coming from Article 6 mechanism, and as well as voluntary funding. And loss and damage fund is the fourth one. So which one are you talking about? Climate change. Well, it's very general. So all four will be included under climate change. Well, it is under the convention, UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. These four are serving these purposes. But I think as an issue, there is a lot of overlap amongst these funds. The adaptation fund is for adaptation, but the other funds also are applied to adaptation. Loss and damage fund also. It's difficult to do the demarcation. So how we avoid this overlap is a challenge. Thank you. There are many more questions, but unfortunately the time is up. Those of you in the hall, I think you can try to approach the speakers to ask directly questions. Please take advantage of this opportunity. The 6 researchers talked about the outcome of COP28 and also others topics. And I would like to thank them and hope that the audience and others were able to deepen their understanding. Well, today, this was a flash seminar, so not everything was covered, but from the researchers' point of view, and there will be issue briefs and other publications for you to deepen your understanding. Plus, it's not a COP report, but climate change webinar series will continue, and therefore a number of opportunities for us to provide you with information. We kindly ask you to refer to these other sources of information. And lastly, we have a request for your feedback, both in this hall and also on Zoom. We ask you to give us your feedback through this survey. And with this, we would like to conclude this session. And we'd like to thank all the 5 on stage and also Tsukui-san from the UK for their contribution. Thank you.